America has never quite taken to football as other countries have, but in between 1968 and 1984, a league existed that appeared to be changing this. The North American Soccer League was the name of this league, and it managed to attract a number of superstars such as Pele, Franz Beckenbauer, Johan Cruyff, and George Best. These superstars managed to attract tens of thousands of spectators to the game, but in the 1980s, the league discontinued. This is a story of the rise and fall of the North American Soccer League. The popularity of football grew in America in the 1960s, thanks in large part to the televising of the 1966 World Cup. In 1967, there were two leagues in the United States, one of which was made up of South American and European teams given local names, that was endorsed by FIFA. There was also the unsanctioned National Professional League. To capitalise on the growing interest in football, the two leagues merged, with the aim of selling the game to the American public. Welshman Phil Woosman, who had emigrated to America in 1966, was a key part in the game's growth. He became coach of the USA national team in 1968 and was the commissioner for the NASL. He focused on growth and recognised the importance of bringing in superstars to increase attendances. The initial years of the league were a struggle, with the league focusing on foreign talent, such as World Cup winning Brazilian Vava, as well as friendlies with English teams to raise money. Many teams folded quickly due to the expenses of player salaries and renting stadiums, and every single team in the league reported a loss in 1968. Many investors pulled out, and CBS withdrew its TV contract. The league headquarters had to be moved to a basement of a multi-purpose stadium in Atlanta, and it seemed as though the league would be lost. The league added a number of new teams in an attempt to survive, such as the New York Cosmos, the Rochester Lancers, and the Washington Darts. The 1971 playoff final was a bizarre affair, as there was no penalty shootout in place, so the game had to be played until a winner was found. Eventually, the Rochester Lancers defeated Dallas Tornado 2-1 after the game lasted for 176 minutes. A number of rule changes were made in an attempt to grow interest in the league, some of which included a clock that counted down from 90 minutes to 0, and if the game ended in a draw, a penalty shootout would take place, but instead of being taken from the spot, the attacker received the ball from 35 yards out and would have to beat the onrushing keeper in a one-on-one. There was also a bonus point for each goal that a team scored. A moment that helped turn the tide occurred in 1973, when Sports Illustrated magazine had a picture of Philadelphia Atoms goalkeeper Bob Rigby on their cover. They covered the Atoms' victory in the NASL Championship, and that year, the Atoms averaged over 10,000 supporters, the first time this had happened in American games since 1967. The magazine's headline was, "Soccer Goes American." The growth continued over the next year, as by 1974, 4 teams had an average attendance of over 10,000. The 1974 championship game between the Los Angeles Aztecs and the Miami Toros was broadcast live on CBS, the first professional football match broadcast on the network since 1968. With the growing attendances, 5 more teams were added to the league in 1975, which meant they had gone from 9 teams in 1973 to 20 in 1975. In 1975, the league also experienced a huge watershed moment. New York Cosmos became an overnight sensation when they signed the Brazilian striker Pele. A media frenzy followed the Brazilians' every move, and attendances at Cosmos games tripled as a result. 10 million people tuned in to watch a CBS broadcast of Pele's debut. Other superstars joined the league that year, such as Eusebio, who joined Boston Minutemen, and George Best would join Los Angeles Aztecs the next year. Many more superstars followed, with Franz Beckenbauer and Carlos Alberto following Pele to New York Cosmos, whilst Johan Cruyff signed for the Aztecs as well. The Minnesota Kicks were established in 1976 and soon became popular, drawing around 20,000 fans a season as they won the Soccer Bowl 4 years in a row. The league didn't just have superstars on the pitch though. The likes of Mick Jagger, Elton John and Peter Frampton all took an interest in the league and invested in teams. By the end of the 1970s, it seemed as though football in America had finally clicked into gear, with interest in the game at an all-time high across the states, and it seemed as though the growth would continue. But soon, the ambitions of the NASL would prove to be their downfall. The league were in constant dispute with FIFA due to their rule changes of the game, and FIFA often threatened to ban NASL players from international games as a result. The league was also receiving criticism for its reliance on foreign talent, and had to bring in rules requiring teams to have homegrown players in their squad. The league expanded to 24 teams in an attempt to capitalise on its popularity, but after a recession in America in the early 1980s, many owners of teams lost the money they could have otherwise invested in the game. The amount of money being spent on salaries was also astronomical. For context, in 1980, NFL teams are spending an average of around 40% of their budget on salaries, whilst NASL teams were spending 70%. Teams were desperately trying to bring in superstars by offering them large salaries that they couldn't cover with TV or matchday revenue. The increase in popularity of the Indoor Soccer League also put teams in a bidding war with indoor football to attract players, which did nothing but add to the already inflated player wages. As a result of these factors, in 1980, the teams in the NASL made a collective loss of around $30 million, and did so again the next year. Several teams ended up folding, including the Washington Diplomats, and 5 more teams folded at the end of the 1981 season. The LA Aztecs and Minnesota Kicks were also forced to fold after buyers for the club could not be found. Many more owners could see the ship was sinking and hence decided to flee. Phil Woosman was removed as commissioner in 1982, and an attempt was made to host the 1986 World Cup in America to promote the league after Colombia withdrew as hosts. However, the hosting rights would end up going to Mexico instead. A salary cap was introduced, and a squad limit of 19 was also put in place in another desperate attempt to save the league, and only 9 teams partook in the 1984 edition. With only 2 teams interested in being involved in the 1985 season, the league was suspended. The NASL had ultimately flew too close to the sun and burnt their wings. Football in America did, in the end, make a recovery, as the USA hosted the 1994 World Cup, and the MLS had its first season 2 years later, and is still going to this day. Football and America have had a strange relationship, but the game does indeed seem to be growing well in the States, as the success of the national women's team indicates, and an analysis by the Sports Mail indicates that football is now the 4th most popular sport in the country, and it is not far behind baseball. With America being a joint host for the 2026 World Cup, the rise may well continue. But many of these years of growth were lost due to mismanagement. Had the NASL been correctly managed, football in America could well be miles ahead of where it currently is. But unfortunately, the people in charge could not see the forest for the trees, and shot for the stars too soon, splashing out money they would not gain back on superstars in a desperate attempt for instant growth. The NASL brought joy to many in its golden years, but for football in America, it was ultimately too much, too soon.